Welcome to the SEC Unfiltered platform, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here with my co-host, Cole Thompson here. Give me the follow at Mr. Cole Thompson. Guys, we're reacting. We're reacting to Kirby Smart. He's leading us off day 2 here on Tuesday in Dallas. We got boots on the ground. Chris Phillips. Give us the follow, guys. Everybody go. We're keeping you up to date all day at the SEC Unfiltered on all social media platforms. Again, I'm your host, Dave Shumate, joined by our guy, Cole Thompson. Cole, what'd you think about, I mean, obviously the dean in the league, I know not in tenure, that's Mark Stoops, but at a success, looking at the resume, he's the guy everybody kind of looks towards like, hey, what's the answer to our league? He talked about it. I'm a Southeastern guy. I've been in the league for 29 plus years when I'm talking about coaching at LSU, Alabama, and his time at Georgia. The thing that hits me is when he says this, Cole, and I'm going to turn it over to you. It's wild. He's been in Athens now 9 years. And like, when he said that, I was like, damn, he's right. I said, he's been there 9 years. That's wild. But what are some things that you got from Kirby Smart?
You know, I think that the biggest question mark a lot of people had was how was he going to handle taking over as the heir apparent for Nick Saban? And what that means is not just with the program of Georgia, with the standard being set, but also kind of being the tone setter for media days, you know, being able to combat jokes with the media, be willing to kind of be a little bit more open, set a kind of stipulation about where you are as a personality. And I thought he handled it really well. You know, he talked about his family, mentioned how his one kid's out in Fiji, his other kid's out in Croatia, threw in the fact that his wife's a Swiftie to keep it kind of relevant. So he brought in a lot of different areas that you would want to hear from Nick to give you that kind of, I am the godfather, I am the tone setter, I am the person that people are looking up to. I thought that he handled a lot of the questions very well when it came to the future of what this program is. I love the fact that he is still emulating exactly what has been taught down in Tuscaloosa and when it was in Baton Rouge and when he was in Miami. You know, we don't really care what expectations are from the outside or what we did last year. We don't need motivation fuel. We're Georgia. We know what the expectations are. We know what the standard is. We know what we have built off of the last few years, and that when we don't meet our internal expectations, that already is enough motivation fuel for us to continue on next year. But it's not going to be a reason why we're, circling in this game saying we have to win against Alabama in Tuscaloosa. We have to be able to get back to Atlanta and punch our ticket to the college football playoff. What this was simply, it's another year. It's another opportunity for us to be better. But don't think for 1 second that we don't think that we know that we were better than what we showed last season at Atlanta. And I think that's a big deal, is that when you don't have to have that outside motivation, you're in a good spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like you said, it's being brought down to what he learned under Nick Saban his 11 seasons, going back to him with LSU and Alabama. I mean, overall, there really wasn't a ton. I thought a phenomenal job. They do as good of anybody. It goes back to his days at Alabama of doing off-season programs, bringing in good speakers. He talked about Nike's branding, how they evolved, what the name means. We've all heard that, how Phil Knight got the name Nike. He threw in a little subtle jab a little bit at our guy Dan Lanning. He said he wished he had the NIL war chest that they have over at Oregon and Eugene, obviously with the backing of Nike and Phil Knight. I mean, overall, though, there wasn't anything real groundbreaking. I don't think anybody really asked him any question that was going to really challenge him either. He kind of see Cole, have you been in SEC? You've been to SEC Media Day, right?
Multiple times, yeah.
Is it kind of a vibe there? Were there any media members that are a little intimidated to ask him a question because you're afraid to get your head bit off? I'm asking. I don't know. I'm not assuming that. I'm asking from someone who's set foot there.
You know, it's interesting because if you did feel that way sometimes about Nick, I'm not sure Kirby ever was, because it was kind of like the second fiddle. You know, it's like going to the CFO versus going to the CEO. You get to have that moment of clarity to where they have some power, but they don't have all the power. So maybe this was one of the first years where, okay, now we're seeing Saban leave. Now we're seeing Smart take over. Is this where we're kind of a little bit intimidated to ask questions? I know that a lot of people are wondering, what about the question with the reckless driving? You know, there was 2 arrests that happened last week. Georgia's been on record at this point to have the most arrests for reckless driving since 2021. Multiple have involved in death. There's been questions about where does the future of this program reside. He did address it. So I want to make this clear for everybody who hasn't seen this yet. He did address it during his private media scrum, mentioning that the arrest, this is the quote exactly, The incidents that we had off the field are something that are unfortunate and we do not condone. It is very unfortunate, disappointing, and I guess the best word. I always talk about the process and outcomes. I talk about with wins and losses. We try not to base things on outcomes with wins and losses. In this situation, the outcome is very disappointing. He's also has already announced that he has dismissed one player, backup safety David Daniel Sivita. So, if that's what we're talking about, like that he didn't get asked that question, maybe it's because of the stipulation. Not entirely sure. I also don't really care. At this point, Smart, as long as the question was asked by somebody at some point, you got your answer and it's been addressed. And again, until we actually see change, then there's going to be that next part. Here's one thing I did want to bring up, though. I thought it was really interesting that Kirk Bowles, the Houston Chronicle, asked about the future of the college football playoff with the expansion. Do you get rid of the conference games? And this was a broad statement. It wasn't just SEC related. It was everywhere related. He said no. Do you find that interesting that he wants to have that conference game?
So the extra conference game, the 9 game?
Yeah. No, the conference championship game.
Oh, the conference championship game. I think it hard for him. I think you'd get a different answer between some other coaches, obviously depending where Georgia's the top dog, right? No pun. But I think it kind of goes back to a little bit. He's probably like, I'm never really have to worry about being left out because we play that extra game. And then also I think it goes back to him talking about it's in the footprint. I grew up in Georgia. I've coached in the SEC for a while. Like the SEC championship game to me is means something. Like they really want to win that thing. Where I think maybe a guy like Josh Heupel, who didn't grow up in it, it's not nothing against him. I'm just using him as an example. Played at Oklahoma. Maybe doesn't have the ties there. The SEC championship game may leave him out one year. So I don't know. I think Kirby really has nothing to lose playing the championship game. I think they're going to be in most years, and I think it goes back to his childhood, him coaching in it, him winning those SEC championship games. I mean, I remember as a student, my roommate, before I started working there in football in Alabama, my roommate was an assistant video guy. He said he ran into Kirby in the tunnel in the Georgia Dome after they beat Florida in the SEC championship in 2009, when they finally kind of got over the hump after losing to Tebow and them in 2008. And he said Kirby Smart picked him up and bear hugged him. He's like, dude, Kirby Smart couldn't tell you my name. He's like, dude, he was so fired up to win that SEC championship game. That always kind of stuck with me. I was like, you can tell it legitimately means something. And he mentioned it today. He's like, I haven't won a ton of SEC championships in reality. He's like, I've won more national championships than I've won. Because remember in 2011, they didn't play for it at Alabama, but they ended up winning the national championship. Yeah. In 2021, he lost to Bama in the SEC championship and got revenge in Indianapolis for the national championship. So he has a couple of national titles without winning the SEC championship. I mean, if you really asked him behind closed doors, he'd probably like, yeah, I mean, I've had a great career, no doubt, but I probably wish I'm a Southeastern guy from Georgia, played at Georgia. I didn't win an SEC championship as a player at Georgia. Probably wish I had some more under my – if you really asked him, it's a first world problem. But still, no. I mean, that's a good point you picked up on from the Houston Chronicle guy asking that. It's a very good point there, Cole. Let me see some other notes we brought up here.
What I find interesting before you go to the next point is that a program like Alabama and a program like Georgia don't have to worry about making it to the conference championship game, losing and being left out of the playoff. And this is a scenario that we haven't seen addressed yet because we don't know what the college football playoff is going to be. But when you talk about having a 3-loss team make it to the postseason, because I don't think that anybody is going to say that if you come in second place that you're going to be left out of the college football playoff. But let's just say that you're 10-2 going to Atlanta and you lose that game, and now you're third. Do you have to now travel on the road? So are you penalized for going to the SEC title, losing in Atlanta, and now instead of hosting a playoff game, now you get to go ahead and face off against an SEC opponent that did have to worry about this type of nonsense? Where Georgia and Alabama, they make it the fair shake. So I think that's also a big reason why he's at a program that doesn't have to worry about those type of question marks, where maybe an Ole Miss does, where maybe a South Carolina does, where maybe a Tennessee does.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to ask Josh Heupel that in about an hour. If he asked him that same question, what his response would be to that. I thought he brought up another good point here, and this is something we talked about. Because me and you were both high on this quarterback. He doesn't play for Georgia. He was actually in Dallas yesterday. But Garrett Nussmeier, I think we talked about him hanging around LSU for a while. And Kirby made a good point about his guy, Carson Beck. He's been around. He's been one of the rare guys that hadn't transferred, and he's been there for a while, stuck it out for 3 years now. I mean, he was committed to Bama at one time. He's from the Jacksonville, Florida area. It seems like he loves the University of Georgia. He doesn't get to talk like that. But again, he was the starter last year, so I think it's kind of forgotten about. It's just kind of the fresh thing on the mind with Garrett Nussmeier. But I do think we do forget about him, myself included. is a guy that has been there for a long while or a long time and has stuck it out at his program when he could have transferred when Stetson Bennett beat him out a couple of years ago.
But the thing is also, he mentioned that I want more players like that. And yeah, you do, but also you're okay with losing a player because if you look at the names that are sitting and waiting in the wings, you feel just as confident in. And I think that ties into the next question that was being brought up about NIL. How do you go about bringing in the right players that are looking for NIL deals versus actually playing for the Bulldogs, playing at Sanford Stadium, playing in Athens, playing for Glenn Schumann, learning the ins and outs underneath a guy like Will Muschamp. And he made it clear, look, if there's an NIL deal that's going to benefit this player with his family a little bit more, that's fine. And I think the reason that he brings that up is because if he realizes we're freaking Georgia. We're a 2-time national champion in the last decade. On top of that, we continuously punch out #1 recruiting classes. We think that you're good enough to play here. But just because if we're not first on your radar doesn't mean that there's not a kid waiting in the wings that we could develop and turn into someone of promise and potential. And we do that in every sense of the word. People always focus in so much on the recruiting aspect of things, how they get the right players in the building and how they get them sent out to the NFL. The pipeline and the coaching tree that Kirby has been coming up with on his own merit, not with the Saban era, but with his own merit, guys like Del McGee. Now you're throwing in Dan Lanning. He even brings him up with Phil Knight and NIL money. Eventually, Schumann's going to get his head coaching job. Those are guys that are starting to be replaced overnight, and they're not missing a beat in that level either. So, yeah, do I think that he was very honest about wanting players to fight it out like Carson Beck? Yeah, of course he is, because he wants to raise the level of competition. But also, if Carson Beck were to leave and he ended up not sticking around with Stetson Bennett, I think he would have been content because if you had another guy waiting in the wings, a guy like Brock Vandegrift, a guy like Gunnar Stockton, a guy who they're going to be bringing in next year that's probably going to be a 5-star. I mean, they're going to be in the running for Juju Lewis. So it's not like they're out of resources to land a certain quarterback. It is great that they were able to keep Carson around. Carson now is set up to be arguably the best quarterback in the conference this year. He spoke very highly of them, but talent's going to get on the field regardless of it. And if you don't believe me, he even mentioned that Malachi Stark started in week 1 against Oregon, and he hasn't been off the field with the first team since.
I'm glad you brought up Malachi Stark. This is my next point. From a standpoint, you could tell he mentioned and even Saban, when they went to the table again or the set, he kind of brought it up on his own, was talking about how people said freshmen can't play at Georgia, and that's been a long thing for Alabama because the defense, they say, is too complicated. So from a cerebral standpoint, you got to have a young early kid like a Minka Fitzpatrick, a Malachi Starks, just throwing that off, freshmen that have came in and had success in the secondary. You talking to people in that building, if there's a concern on that team this year, they say it's the safety spot outside of Malachi Starks. Who steps up in that second spot? Is it, they kind of lean right now, is it the KJ Bolden kid, the transfer they got, or not transfer, the freshman they signed from Buford that was back and forth between Florida State and Georgia? So it kind of sounded like Kirby throwing a little, hey, we'll say it sounded like Florida State was kind of putting that in KJ Bolden's ear, like, hey, man, it's going to be tough to go play as a true freshman back there for those guys. Maybe the Dan Jackson kid can stay healthy a little bit. He hadn't been able to stay healthy. But I think that's a question mark for them. I think it goes back to, hey, you could see another freshman have to play meaningful minutes, and we'll see. And he brought up people selling or going against Georgia in recruiting, telling them that, hey, it's tough to play in the secondary as a freshman or an income freshman. And that's not wrong either. I mean, to be fair, that ain't no wrong statement. For most kids, that is a difficult adjustment. But as we've seen at Alabama with freshmen when Kirby's been there and when Kirby's been at Georgia, freshmen can come play in that secondary and start.
If you're good, you're good. That's the main point. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, when you're a program that is trying to win national titles and has the capability with veteranship, people will pick up the pieces for a young player that's still learning the ropes. I mean, go back to when Malachi Stark first made an appearance. You know, he wasn't polished. He wasn't ready to come out there and be swinging like a 5-star. Like, there's very few players like Caleb Downs that exist in college football when they enter the league, where they immediately are the best player on the field, regardless of what position they play. And that was it last year, and it was the way that Saban saw his tenure come to a close with, hey, I got a kid that if I'm able to keep him here and I stick around, we are going to be so damn good for the rest of the time that we don't have to worry about it. That's just the case. Like, there's not many. There's a reason why we call people like Kyle Pitts and him unicorns when they immediately touch down, because they're not going to just immediately flourish. But the veteranship that you have there with guys in the secondary, that whether or not you have to still replace Javon Bullard and Kamari Lassiter, who were underclassmen that just went to the NFL, they have guys that have been in the system. It is a new system, so it is going to be a learning curve in a sense for Travarius Robinson. T-Rob's not really changing much because of the same teachings that were underneath Kirby or were underneath Nick Saban as well. So I don't really worry about that kind of conversation. But what you talk about is if you have to play KJ Bolden, well, you have to also feel confident that the veterans around him will step up and deliver.
Correct. I agree. Yeah, you understand going into that. They know they're going to coach. I mean, all these analysts and stuff can coach now. He's going to have plenty of film sessions, have plenty of people helping him coach up. Before we get out of here, though, Cole, again, I know it's SEC Media Days. These teams are still covered 24/7, 365 with social media, new era. You change your thoughts a little bit, feel differently, good or bad about Georgia after this? You're like, not really about the same.
No, but I will say this. I've said it. Dave has said it. Chris has said it. Nick Saban has said it. Josh Heupel has said it. Kirby Smart has said it. Hugh Freeze has said it. At this point, can we get over the fact that Jordan-Hare Stadium is one of the toughest places to play? It's not the prettiest stadium in college football. It's not the biggest stadium in college football. It's not the most magical stadium in college football. It doesn't have the same type of ambiance as Tiger Stadium or Neyland Stadium. But it is one of the toughest places to play in college football. And I'm just some dumbass on the internet screaming into a microphone. These are two national championship coaches who have said, I hate playing at Auburn. There's a reason they hate playing at Auburn. I don't need to say it anymore. Just understand. Yeah, it's a done deal. Kirby thinks it. Nick thinks it.
Yeah.
They're done.
Right. You combine probably their records when they've been together at LSU, Alabama, and Georgia. Combined, they probably have maybe 4 games they've won comfortably there. Like combined, I mean, Georgia in 19, I think, won comfortably in Auburn. Saban really did it only twice, probably 11.
It doesn't happen.
It doesn't. Like, when Auburn is good, and I say this, and I'm sure someone will comment on my Twitter. Well, when anybody's good, it's tough to go win at their place.
No, it's not.
But it's different. Like as you can attest, when Auburn is good and they play a big game at home, when there's consequences on the line, they win 9 times out of 10, dude. It is just a tough place to play.
When Auburn sucks, when Auburn's average, they win 6 times out of 10. Like that's the level of Jordan-Hare. That's where my brain goes all the time. I get it. It's not Bryant Denny. It's not Kyle Field. It's not Neyland. It's not Tiger Stadium. That doesn't take away from the fact that it is one of the toughest places to play. And it always has been for both of these programs. So you heard it from us. You heard it here from EA Sports. But EA, you're really going to tell a 2-time national champion and a 7-time national champion, we know more than you in this video game. Go ahead and sit down and pipe down. You're really going to say that?
No, I don't even know how you can really argue. That's why I'm so comfortable. We're not talking about Auburn here. I think they beat Oklahoma in week 5 at home because Auburn's going to be undefeated coming into that. First road game for Jackson Arnold, first for 5 new starters offensive line. It's going to be a tough place to play. As Cole mentioned, you heard it from Kirby Smart. You've heard it from Nick Saban. You've heard it from all of us guys here at the SEC Unfiltered. Guys, I appreciate you joining us. Me and Cole will be back here after Josh Heupel finishes up his press conference in probably about another hour and a half, reacting to what Josh Heupel and the Tennessee Volunteers have to have. But that's a wrap for Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs at the SEC Media Days. They're going to different tables and stuff, but from the head table, that will be it. Cole, anything else to add before we get out of here?
Georgia, congratulations. Welcome to now being the front runners in the SEC. At least, one more thing. Hate to say this. Texas people, stop asking about Texas. We get it. You're Texas. Oh, by the way, Kirby was 100% right. Kirby was 100% right. Everyone is the toughest schedule. Texas is going to learn that the hard way, I think. I think that's the only way they're going to have to learn it at this point.
No doubt. All right, for myself, Dave Shumate, and my host here, Cole Thompson, we're the guys over here at SEC Unfiltered. Again, Chris Phillips, boots on the ground. Give us the follow. Go like, subscribe, give us rate, review, whatever you want to do. Just tell us how we can do a better job, how we can get you more SEC content. I don't really know how we can, but we're open to suggestions, guys. But we'll see you here in about another hour and a half. Appreciate you joining us.